Hi, I am Shashwat. I hope you are having a really great day. In part 1 of Introduction to Titles and Motion Graphics, we walk through on how to quickly create simple titles and also how to animate them using both traditional text animation techniques as well as how to use a follower modifier to automate certain parameters. In this video, we will walk through on how to apply a stroke animation to our text and give it a 3D dynamic camera move. So let's get started. Fusion does not have the feature to create shapes out of text. It also does not have the feature to animate the outline of the text as a stroke. So the only way around it is to type our text on another software such as Affinity Designer, Adobe Illustrator or even Pixelmator, and then export it as an SVG file and import it in Fusion. To import the SVG file in Fusion, go to Files, Import and click on SVG. Now go to the location where your SVG file is located, select it and then press Open. Next, it will prompt you for your required resolution of the SVG file. Since I want a 2000 by 2000 resolution, I will leave it be and press OK. It loads our SVG file as a group node. Now before we move forward, right-click in the Nodes editor, go to Arrange Tools and select To Grid. This snaps the node to the grid points and helps in better organizing our node structures. Now, to load the node, drag and drop it into the viewer. Now click on this icon to remove the split screen and then select Fit to Screen. And this is what our text looks like. And if you see over here, our resolution is 2000 by 2000. Now if you notice at this moment we are unable to perform any changes to our text. That's because they are all grouped inside this group node. Double click on this group node to expand it and select all the nodes inside of it. Press Ctrl C. Now move it over and press Ctrl V. We can see all of our text nodes. Now delete this group node. Load this merge node into the viewport. Now we have our text which we can modify. So let's take a look at what's happening over here. Select these three nodes and drag them aside. So this node is a polygon node. You can create various shapes using this node, or you can create alphabets. And this is exactly what happens when you import an SVG file. Let's delete this. Now in this polygon node, which is called Path, go to the inspector to access the polygon settings. Here we are just concerned with two parameters. We have the border width, which allows us to control the thickness of the edge, and we have this length, which allows us to create stroke animations. We also have this position slider, which allows us to position our stroke. Now in this Path 2 node, which is connected directly underneath this one, we can see a new parameter which is not available in Path 1. This parameter called Paint Mode uses math functions to modify our mask and alpha. For example, let's load a rectangle mask and an ellipse mask. Connect the rectangle to the ellipse mask and load the ellipse mask into the viewport. Now in the ellipse mask node, go to the Paint Mode and change from Merge to, let's say, Subtract, to subtract the ellipse from the rectangle. Or we can use Invert to create this interesting looking shape. So this is what this parameter does. But in the case of our text, we will leave it to Merge. Now this is a background node. It allows us to create anything from a simple color background to complex loopable gradients. Now we have connected the polygon node to the background node. What these two nodes are doing here is masking the background node to create the alphabets. Now we can change the color of the text using the background node by going over here and changing the color to whatever is needed. Now over here we can see another group of our polygon nodes which create the letter O. and this connects to the previous alphabet using the merge node. The merge node connects two different nodes using the alpha channel of the foreground node. If you notice, all of our alphabets are connected to a different background node and have different paths. So let's just organize this. I want alphabet I in one group, the letters of love in one group, and earth in another group. Now, disconnect the alphabet I and the alphabet L from the scene. Connect the L to the O polygon and both of them to these polygons, completing the word love. Now we have this word ready and we have the I over here. So let's delete all of these background as well as the merge nodes, because we are going to create our own. Now repeat the process for the word earth. Let's bring them all together, and now let's add a background node. Drag and drop a background node and change the image settings to 2000 by 2000. Change the depth to 16. Now connect the letter I to the background node and load it into the viewport. Now let's change the color of the background. So go to color settings and change the color to gray. Now select the polygon node and change the border width. Here we can't exactly see what the border width looks like. To see it, click on these three dots and then click on Show Control. This will hide the points and you will be able to see the path clearly. Now continue adjusting your border width as desired. Now let's connect the background node to the rest of the polygons. Click on the background node, press Ctrl C, and we are going to be creating an instance copy of this background node. Now to create an instance file, press Shift Ctrl V. Now connect the love node group to the instance background node. Now we will connect these two background nodes using a merge node. So drag a merge node from the tools bar and first connect this background node to the background input of the merge node, and then connect the instance background node to the foreground input of the merge node. Now drag it into the viewport. This is what instance background does. If I change the color in this node, then it automatically reflects the change on the other node. Now we will connect the earth polygon node group to another instance background node and merge this node to the rest of the composition. Now we will change the border width of the rest of the polygon nodes. So go to the I polygon node, copy the value of the border width, and now paste this value on the rest of the polygon nodes. To save time, I'm going to fast forward the process. Now, let's convert this 2D text into a 3D object. Now over here in the tools bar, we can see some of our 3D tools. We have image plane 3D, shape 3D. We can add a 3D text into the scene. We can merge various 3D nodes using this merge node. We can add a 3D camera, some 3D lights, and finally, the render 3D node can render out a 3D scene as a 2D image. Now let's drag a image plane 3D and load it into the viewport. Now before we move forward, let's rename this node. Press F2 and type I_love_earth_merge. And in the viewport, go to the three dots in the top right corner and press Show Controls. This allows us to see our transform controls. These arrows allows us to move in the 3D space. In 2D space, we can only move either up or down or left and right. But in 3D space, we can also move forward and backward using these transform keys. We can change from move to rotation or scale. Press rotation, it gives us the circles which allows us to rotate in a particular axis. And scale gives us these square boxes instead of arrows to scale the object in a particular axis. Another way we can manipulate our text is by going into the transform section in the image plane settings, and we can move, rotate or scale using these sliders or by typing a particular value. If we press on this dot underneath the sliders, we can reset to the default value. Now go back to the move tool. Now we are going to connect our merge node to the image plane 3D. Now click on the output of the merge node, drag and drop the wire on top of the image plane 3D to connect them. And as we can see, it automatically takes it as a material. The image plane 3D has two inputs. One is the 3D scene input and the other is the material input. When we connect our text, it automatically connects to the material input. To navigate in the 3D viewport, press the middle mouse button to move, press Alt and middle mouse button to rotate, press Ctrl and scroll to zoom in and out. Now the next step is to duplicate the text and move it in the Z-axis to add depth. To do that, we will duplicate the image plane 3D node twice, so that we have 3 image plane 3D nodes. Now connect our Earth merge node to the other 2 image planes and rename all the image plane 3D nodes. So we will rename the first image plane as front, the second as middle, and the third as back. Now let's connect all 3 of them to a merge 3D node. So pull down a merge 3D node and connect the output of all 3 image planes to this node. Now to move them slightly in the Z-axis, select the middle image plane, go to transform settings and change the Z-axis to -0.01. Now select the back image plane and change the Z-axis to -0.03. And this is what it looks like. Now we will change the color of the image plane. Select the front image plane, go to materials, and we will give this a reddish color. For the middle image plane, we will give it a greenish color. And to the back image plane, we'll give it a bluish color. Let's load another merge 3D node and connect it after this merge 3D node. Now drag a camera into the node editor, connect it to the merge 3D node and load the merge 3D node into the viewport. And now we have a camera in the scene. To view the scene as a 2D image, let's add a render 3D node and connect the merge node to the render 3D node. Now split the screen, load the render 3D node and make sure that it fits to the screen. The render node should show the view from the camera. Now pull the camera back in the Z-axis so that we can see our text. Next, change the focal length of the camera to 100 mm. After that, pull the camera back some more. Currently, we are unable to see our text clearly, so let's add a background node after the render 3D node. So click and drag a background node and a merge node. Connect the background node to the merge node and then the render 3D node to the merge node. Now select these two and pull them off to the side and load the merge node into the scene. Now this is what a scene looks like through the eyes of the camera. Now tweak the transform settings of the camera until the text sits in the center of the scene. Now let's have a look at the render 3D node. Suppose you have more than one camera in a scene, which is quite possible if 3D projection mapping is used in a composition. So you might need to choose through which camera you will be watching the rendered scene. In this case, I will be choosing camera 3D. In renderer type, we can decide which render engine we want to use to render out the scene. Over here we have two render types, the hardware renderer and the software renderer. For this scene, the software renderer will do just fine. Now go to image and change the depth to 16-bit integer. And now change the depth in the background node to 16-bit integer as well. Now let's add a dynamic camera move to this. After camera 3D, let's add a transform 3D node. To do so, select the camera 3D node, press Shift space to open the select tool. Type transform and it shows you two transform nodes. This first one is a 2D transform node, but we will be selecting the one below it, the transform 3D node, because we are working with 3D. Press add and it automatically adds it after the camera 3D node. Now we will be animating our camera using the transform 3D node. But before that, let's change our frame range. Go to global end time, double click and change it to 80. Now at frame number 42, we are going to add a keyframe to translation, rotation and scale. We are going to be rotating our camera and zooming in on our text. Now, right-click on the 3D viewport, go to Camera and change the view to top. Now go to frame number 0 and reduce the scale to 0.2089. Change the Y translation to 0.026. Change the Y rotation to 20.6 and the Z rotation to 28.9. Finally, we'll move the camera in the X-axis about -0.005. Now if we scroll through the timeline, we can see our camera being animated. Now let's animate it further and give our camera some stay for a few frames. So at frame number 57, add a keyframe to scale. Now, from here onwards, we are going to start zooming the camera straight through the text. So, at frame number 75, I'm going to zoom the camera and change the scale value to about 0.001 and zoom the camera completely through the text. Now press play and this is what our animation looks like. Now let's make it even more interesting. We'll add a slight anticipation just before the camera zooms into the text. So at frame number 62, we will reset the scale to 1. Now go back 2 frames at frame number 60 and change the scale value to 1.064, pulling it back slightly. Now, let's smooth our animation in the spline editor. We can hide the inspector so that we have more space to work. With the transform node selected, go to the 3 dots on the top right corner of the spline editor and press show selected tool only. Since we are only going to be working with the scale, we will only unhide the scale. And now we can see the scale curves in the graph editor. Now, let's select the first 2 keyframes and in the bottom left corner of the spline editor, click the smooth button. And now let's adjust the curve. Now select these 3 keyframes and press smooth. Now go back to the first keyframe of the scale and pull it back to frame number -11. And now let's adjust the curves a little bit more. Now go back to frame number 0 and press play. And this is what our camera movement looks like. Now we can switch off the spline editor. Now we are going to animate the text as a stroke. Stroke animation is when we animate the border or edge of a shape. So, zoom into the eye, select the path, and we are going to animate the length to create a stroke animation. Now go to frame number 30 and add a keyframe to the length. Now go to frame number 0 and change the length value to 0. To see the animation, load the I Love Earth merge node into the viewport, switch off show controls and press play. We can see the text is being animated. Now apply the same animation to the rest of the polygon paths. I will fast forward the process to save time. Now let's play, and this is what our animation looks like. Another thing that we are going to do is that just before the image plane 3D node, we are going to add a time speed node so that we can delay or offset two of our 3D text layers. So press Shift space, type time and select time speed and add it into the node editor. So we are going to connect this time speed node to the middle and to the back. So connect this to the middle and in the controls, change the delay value by about 2 frames. Now duplicate this node and connect it to the back. And give this a delay about -1 frame. Now let's load our scene and go to frame 0. Press play and this is what our animation looks like up till now. Now we are going to add some effects like a blur or a soft glow after the render 3D node. So select the background and the merge node and move it all the way to the side so that we have some space to add our nodes. Now select the render 3D node and press Shift space and type glow to add the glow node. In the glow node settings, change the glow size to 0 and change the glow value to 0.961. Now I want the glow to be controlled by a mask, so I will add another time speed node. Connect the render 3D node to the time speed node, and in the time speed node we are going to change the delay value to 30. Next we will add a bitmap node after the time speed node to convert it into a black and white mask. The bitmap node allows images from the flow to act as a mask for tools and effects. So in this case, I will be using the time speed output as a mask to drive the glow. So press Shift space and type bitmap and then press add. Now connect the time speed node to the bitmap node. And if we load the bitmap node into the viewport, we can see it creates a black and white mask. Now we will duplicate this bitmap node and we will connect the render 3D node to this new bitmap node. So if we load it into the viewport, we can see that these are two different scenes. One has a delay of 30 frames and this is how it looks like after the delay. And the other is how our animation actually looks like at the current frame. Now we will combine these two bitmap nodes using a matte control. A matte control is used to manipulate an existing alpha channel or to create one by hand using rotoscoping. With this tool, one can copy a color channel or add alpha channel from the foreground to the background, or to combine alpha channels from two different images. So click and drag the matte control from the toolbar and we will first connect this bitmap node to it. So right click on the output, drag the wire on top of the matte control and let it go. It opens a dialog box and it asks you where you want to connect this bitmap node. So in this case, we want to connect it to the background. And now we will be connecting this one to the foreground. Now load the matte control into the scene. And in the matte control settings, we will change the combine from none to combine alpha because we want to combine the alpha channels of the two bitmaps. And in the combine operation, we will change from copy to subtract. And this is what our matte control looks like. And we will give it some blur about 3.46. Now we will connect the matte control to the mask area, which is the blue arrow of the glow node. And this is how our glow looks like. And we can see that the mask is driving where the glow will happen. So let's go back and press play. And this is what our animation looks like. Now let's add another glow. This time we will be adding a soft glow. So select glow, press Shift space, type soft glow and press add. And we have now added the soft glow to the composition. Now go to frame number 54 so that we can see our full text. Now let's go to the soft glow settings. Here we will be animating the RGB channel as well as the gain parameter of the soft glow. So first, remove the red and green channel so that only the blue channel is being processed by the glow. Now change the gain to about 4.57 and change the glow size to 14.2. Now at frame number 61, add a keyframe to RGBA channel and to the gain parameter. Then at frame number 63, add a keyframe and then switch on the green channel. Then after 2 frames at frame number 65, add a keyframe and now switch on the red channel. Finally at frame number 66, reduce the gain to about 2.68 to bring down the brightness of the glow. Now before we move on, let's open the spline editor. Make sure that soft glow is selected. Then press this button to fit the curves to the screen. Then deselect gain and alpha. Now all we are left with are red, green and blue curves. Select all the keyframes in the red, green and blue curves, and in the bottom left of the spline editor, press the step in button to create a step in animation. Now we can switch off the spline editor. And if we go back and press play, this is what our animation looks like. Next we will add a directional blur to the composition. So press Shift space and type blur. Select directional blur and press add. Then connect the soft glow to the directional blur. Now we will connect the directional blur to the rest of the composition using a merge node. So click and drag on the output of the directional blur and connect it to the output of the soft glow. And the moment we let go, Fusion automatically connects the 2 nodes with a merge node. Now in the directional blur settings, change the length to 0.51 and change the glow to 0.409. Then change the type from linear to center, and we can see that the directional blur is now happening in both directions. Finally, we will animate the angle. So at frame number 60, rotate the angle to about 68.7 and then add a keyframe. Now go to frame number 0 and rotate the angle to 113. Now press play, and this is what the directional blur looks like. Now if we look closely, we can see these weird artifacts happening in the directional blur. To remove them, we will be adding a blur node after the directional blur. So press Shift space, type blur and then add the blur node. In the blur settings, change the blur size to 9.2. Next we will add a color curve node after the blur. So go to the color corrector settings in the toolbar and drag the color curve node. Hover it over the wire until it turns blue and green and then drop it, and it automatically connects in the composition. Now in the color curve settings, select the top key and bring down the highlights just slightly. And this is how our scene looks like. Now after the directional blur, let's add a color corrector node. So click and drag the color corrector node, hover it over the line and then drop it to automatically connect it to the composition. Now scroll down in the color correction settings and in the RGB channel, increase the gain to 1.83. And in the blue channel, reduce the gain to 0.69 to remove some blue from the scene. Now, after the color correction node, let's add another soft glow. And in this soft glow settings, reduce the gain to 0.394. And then change the glow size to 11. Now, if we look closely, we can see that the directional blur is too bright and it's overpowering the text. So to adjust that, go to the merge node, and in the merge node settings, we will be animating the blend parameter, which blends the foreground to the background. So at frame number 33, add a keyframe to blend and reduce it to about 0.35. Now at frame number 26, change the blend to 0.677. Now, let's see what else we can do. How can we make this animation even better? So around frame number 23, the middle part of the animation, we are unable to see clearly the red, green and blue colors that we had given our text. It looks okay after frame number 38, but before that it's a bit too bright and the blue is overpowering and mixing with the rest of the colors and giving this a very weird purple or violet color that we don't want. So let's go back to the image plane 3D and animate the colors. Select the front node, and in the material properties we will be animating the color. So let's add a keyframe to the red, green and blue channel at frame number 38. and do the same with the middle and back as well. And now frame number 20 onwards is when the transition will start to happen. So at frame number 20, we will change the colors. So select the front once again, and in the colors, we will remove all the green and the blue from the scene and change the red value to 0.66. Now let's select the middle, and in the colors, we will remove all the red from the scene, and we will reduce the blue to about 0.04, and we will brighten the green slightly to about 0.584. Now select the back image plane node, and in its material, we will remove the red completely. We will reduce the green considerably to about 0.031, and we will leave the blue as it is. Now go back and press play, and we can see the colors popping up. And this is what the animation looks like. Now we are going to give the text a reflection. So let's zoom over here, and let's first add a background node and a merge node. We will be connecting the I Love Earth node with the background node. Now connect the background node to the merge node, and then connect the I Love Earth node to the merge node. Now let's rename the node as reflection. Now let's load this reflection node into the viewer window. If we move up, we can see that its resolution says 1920 by 1080 and 8-bit depth. So let's change this. Go to the background node, and in the image settings, change the height and width to 2000 by 2000 and change the bit depth to 16. Now let's add another merge node. This merge node is only for reference. We will be removing this once we are done with it. So first connect the reflections to this node, and then connect the I Love Earth merge node to it. And now load it into the scene. Now to create the mirror of our text, we will be using a transform node. So add a transform node between the I Love Earth node and the reflection. In the transform properties, flip the text in the vertical direction. Now drag it down slightly in the y-axis just underneath the original text. Now we will be adding a gradient mask to fade the reflection the more it moves away from the source. To do this, add a rectangle polygon mask and connect it to the reflections merge node. Scale its width and reduce its height to roughly the height of the text and position it. Now increase the soft edge to about 0.0913. Now pull up the mask and align the bottom edge just underneath the original text. Now we will add some blur to the reflections. So select reflections, press Shift space and type blur. Then press enter. Now we have a blur node. Now increase the blur size to about 2.7. Now we will mask the blur because currently the entirety of the reflection is being blurred, and we want the area closer to the text to be sharp. So connect a rectangle polygon node to it, scale its width and reduce its height. Then pull it down. Give it some soft edge and now pull it down further. Now move its position or adjust the soft edge. Basically, play with the settings until it works for you. Okay, so now we can delete this merge node, and this is what our reflections look like. Now to connect the reflections to the rest of the scene, we will first instance all the nodes starting from the time speed node all the way to the soft glow before the directional blur. Now press Ctrl and left click and drag and deselect the camera nodes and the glow mask nodes. Now press Ctrl C. Now move down and press Shift Ctrl V to create instance. Now let's create some space. Select these nodes and move them over to the side. Now align all the instance nodes just below the original nodes. Now let's pull these down. Basically, we are creating a mirror of the nodes above. Now connect our reflection blur to the instance time speed nodes and the image plane 3D. Now we need to connect our camera to the instance merge. So click and drag the output of the transformation and connect it to the instance merge. Now load the instance render and go back to the background. In the color, remove all the alpha. Now we need to connect the instance soft glow to the rest of the composition. So click and drag a merge node and connect it just after the directional blur node. And now connect the instance soft glow to the merge node. Now load the scene and this is what we have. Now in the merge node, we can adjust the brightness of the reflection by moving the blend parameter. Now this is what our composition looks like. With this, you can either render it out or continue to tweak the values and the keyframe here and there. If you want to remove some nodes, you can do so. Or if you want to add more nodes, you're free to do so to get whatever looks that you desire to achieve. With this, we are done with this composition, and this is what our final composition looks like. In part 3 of Introduction to Titles and Motion Graphics, we will go through each step in detail on how to create 3D titles and import USD models to create this composition. So like, subscribe and ring that bell icon to receive the notifications for part 3. So that's all for today. Until next time, see you.